Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back. My name's Shay Douglas, and today I'm joined by these beautiful ladies. We've got Colleen, Sally, and Angie, and we're going to open the conversation up about rites of passage. This time last week, 7 days ago, 168 hours ago, we were sitting here chatting about the rise of the matriarch and also about how amazing these women are and about lots of other fun stuff around coming of age, womanhood, manhood, and ultimately all about humanity, really. It was a really wonderful conversation that's actually gone viral now on Facebook and on the World Wide Web. And so we decided to do another conversation, which goes into a little bit more depth around this idea, this practice of rites of passage. And so welcome back, ladies, and hello to everyone. If you're tuning in, please let us know where you're tuning in from, what you like about this conversation. And if you do like it, please share it, like it, and pass it on to your friends, because it's going to be a fun conversation today. And I'd just like to hear from you, ladies. What exactly is a rites of passage, and what's the importance of it?
Okay. Sorry. Okay, we're making sure we're all in there. Hi, everyone. Great to be back. I loved our last conversation. So, I think rites of passage are just those transitions that we all go through in life, and kind of like speaking about it just from a female perspective or my own perspective, I look at it's those different transitions that we all kind of go through. So in Indigenous cultures, you have the storylines of the child, the maiden, the mother, and the crone. And with each of those, there are transformations and transitions that happen. We can sometimes look at them as challenging. I always have kind of looked at them as opportunities for growth and health and healing. They look different for everybody, but I think just as a general rule, all of us go through them, whether we're male or female, and we can go through them at different ages. Sorry, but I think that they're a big part of how we grow and how we evolve. And back in, I guess, ancient times or in Indigenous cultures, there would be a lot more understanding about these, rites of passages, and there would be the whole community there to support the individuals as they're going through them. So they actually had, whether they were rituals or ceremonies or something that marked that transition, and then being able to have the elder support the younger people going through their different stages. So that's it, kind of in a nutshell from my perspective. And
I think that's really valuable, and I think also it's a really important time for you to be present with yourself and really embody where you are in your life path. So it's an opportunity for growth, and it's an opportunity to reflect, and an opportunity to move through into the next stage of life as if it was a season. And I think even if we look at ourselves as part of nature and the seasons of life, these little journeys that we take ourselves on are all part of a marked time frame. And it's kind of it's almost an understanding about where you are in your life path.
Yeah, I haven't got a great deal to add to that. Well done, ladies. Only that in relation to marking the event, it's marked by a ceremony, or as Cole said, ritual or ceremony, but it's also really looking at the individual physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. And because more than likely the rite of passage is, say, from boyhood into manhood, or from girlhood into womanhood, or from single into marriage, or going into a pregnancy. And so usually the event as such, or the recognition, acknowledgement's created because there's some kind of change about to happen, where a person is leaving one phase or stage or part of their life behind and moving into another phase or stage of life which is unknown. And so there's a shift in psychology, usually shifts in perception, how you see the world. You girls will know, from not having a child to being pregnant and having a child, it's a complete mind, body, soul shift. And to mark those events and to acknowledge them, and also to recognize your life prior to that shift and change, and to honor where you are and what you've been through that got you to this point, and then what are the new changes. And usually when Colleen was suggesting that it's marked where community gather, and the community gather to witness you, and then usually people in the community will put their hand up as such to be a part of that person's life and to contribute to their life in some way, whether it's uncles and aunties or friends of the parents or friends of yourselves, where they'll support you. They recognise you in this shift and change, and they'll be there to witness you and support you and to help you move into these changes and really embody whatever the next phase of your life is.
Yeah, I think it's really valuable. The connection of the community is such a big aspect of it, and also in the lineage of the family or the creating family.
Yeah, I think that's where it takes a village to raise a child.
Yeah.
Came from, and our Indigenous cultures do it extremely well. In Western society, I'm not sure whether or not we've all nailed it, but we've certainly got an understanding of what that would look like. But it's certainly changed. I know for you, when I got married, I moved away, so I didn't have that long-term family support, friends of family. So I had to create a whole new life. And so, going through that is a rite of passage as well. So we look at, marriage, death. Death is an extremely sacred rite of passage. Lots of examples.
Yeah. And I think it ties in with, I find it really interesting, like living in Australia now for the last 25 years, but I noticed in Canada, like we have like such a distinct change of seasons. And, you can take it into, you see it in the change of seasons, you see it in, from night to day, like we've got a 24-hour period where we kind of have those same changes that happen in life. So it's mirroring nature in that way. But I had noticed that living here where we live in the tropics, at least, where I am in Cairns and then on the sunny coast, that it wasn't as evident. And I found that I wasn't honoring those changes as much as I should be. And same with you, Angie, like moving to another country, not having family, having to, create your own families when you're moving into marriage and motherhood, and now moving into that next stage in life as well. And being able to connect with other women who are able to honor and support and help navigate those changes. I feel like, sometimes it's almost like, we're the caterpillar that's in this dark cocoon and we're now emerging to be a butterfly again. It's just like, and there's just this constant change that happens throughout life. And I don't feel we focus enough on the importance of it and offering the support that people need in either to embody these changes.
I think even in the woman's cycle, we have such an interesting cycle that we can connect to a moon cycle to actually follow through in all of those contexts of looking at our shadows and going inside and reflecting and then creating and being illuminated. And it's all of the macrocosm comes into the micro as rites of passage and cycles in our bodies. It's phenomenal.
I think an essential part of that too, Sel, is having that community support and having people that have gone before you, whether or not you've moved countries or you're going from girlhood into adulthood, but to be surrounded by loving, compassionate people who've been through what you're about to go through.
Sure.
Really important for them to share their stories. In a way that helps you navigate and gives you some confidence as to move into the new phase of whatever the change is.
That value part is so important, just being able to tap into other people's wisdoms about the journey that they've been on in order to help be like those shining beacons, I guess, in some ways. And of course, everybody's journey is going to, you're going to have your individual path, but to be able to have those around you that walked before to just, share and guide and help it makes a massive, it just makes, I feel it makes the journey a little bit easier, not as bumpy and messy. I mean, life is going to always be bumpy and messy, but there are ways that we can make it not as bad as it needs to be.
Yeah, thank you, ladies, for sharing. Lovely explanation of the rites of passage, and I'm really keen to dive into this a little deeper and understanding really the deep foundational importance of honoring, acknowledging, and celebrating these transitional periods. And what is the consequences for the human's life if, for example, it's not honored, celebrated, and acknowledged? And how does that impact upon an individual's life over their period? And we spoke about the rites of passage of death and birth, which I want to cover in a little bit. However, really focusing on, for example, maybe the birth, the pregnancy, or the womanhood or the manhood piece, particularly if, say, for example, it's got lost in the culture, which it has seemingly happened in the westernized kind of mainstream, but we only have to look through many cultures throughout the world that still exist today, and there is some fundamental process that the individual goes through, which becomes a self-actualization, self-realization process of self-awareness, and how that they can reclaim their individual sovereignty and navigate in the world with others. And then having that integral piece, as you all mentioned, for that person to come back into society or into a community and be seen for the transformational change that they've been through and be celebrated from this new perspective. And what happens, say, for example, a whole culture of people do not miss this pinnacle opportunity. What happens if, on a large scale, we live in a world which are full of young girls in women's bodies and young boys in men's bodies? What is the impact that they may have on our society and on our culture at large?
Yeah, that's a really big one, Shay. I think recently I had an experience of being in a woman's circle to honour the harvest stage of life, which could be seen as menopause, but basically moving into that menarche stage of your life. And for me, it was an opportunity to honor and respect anything that had not been healed in my life. And I think if you look at each of those stages, to open up an opportunity to feel and let go of all the things that are no longer serving you, or may have trauma attached, or have basically it's a chance to actually allow you to move through it and let go and open up a new path. So in response to the question of what happens if we don't have this opportunity, I think we're going to have a lot of people that are going to need really, really deep holding and healing. So
yeah, I agree 100%.
Yeah. What happens is people start initiating themselves. When there's a lack of initiation, young kids will find their way in acting out, and they'll find their way to express, whether or not that's emotions or some kind of physical. They can express through tattoos, piercing, anything to be seen. And there's nothing wrong with all these ways. And even if you've gone through a rite of passage, it's still okay to have a piercing or a tattoo or what have you. But sometimes in order for a young person, for instance, to be seen, and then not even knowing who they want to be seen for, because they've not come through a community, family orientation that's supported them from a young age, So I think the consequences of that is people acting out in unsavory ways to be seen and acknowledged. And also it comes from a lack of belonging. Like, where do I fit? Where do I fit in society? So they self-initiate. And we've seen gangs, gangs, and then they create their own rites of passage. Yeah. So it's like this lack of traditional initiation, traditional value, a traditional belief system or a value system that's inherent within a certain lineage, that's not passed on, doesn't cultivate the qualities and the characteristics within a human being that they're then able to live a compassionate life of value in society and know why they're here and what their purpose is.
Yeah, I think that's spot on, Angie. I find that people will look for ways to kind of belong, or look for their peers, or anybody that they're going to find around to help them, guide them to those next stages and transitions, whether they're aware of it consciously or not. So I think it does create the rise of I guess
Violence.
Violence, but also, they're wanting to belong and the connection in the community. So they're going to look for it anywhere that they can, and you can get led astray on that path that may not be, serving the best interest of being able to show up as the best version of yourself. So I think that's a big part of it. The other side of it too, I feel like also would enter into feeling very lost and overwhelmed, because they would just be drifting. And that I can see that in whether that's young people going into that next stage of kind of trying to figure out who they are and how they fit into the world, but also mothers. Like, I see this massively with new moms, in that they're just so overwhelmed. They're just feeling like they can't get on top of things. They don't know who they are anymore, how they fit into all of this, because we haven't helped them find that path and discover that next and new version of themselves in that motherhood role. And I feel that the other side of not honoring these transitions or these stages is that we don't stop and reflect to see where the wounding is that we're carrying with us. So we just carry it to the next transition and to the next transition, and those things tend to get louder and louder, and we don't realize why that's happening. And it's like our soul trying to get our attention, that letting us know that it's time for us to release or heal or honor that part of us that's no longer best to serve us when the next place that or the next stage that we're turning up in life or showing up in life too. So I think that those are just a few of the ways that it kind of presents itself in our culture.
And I think we've seen what happens in America is a typical example of what happens when consequences of a lack of direction, and there's a lack of respect then for authority. There's a lack of respect for elders. There's a lack of respect for community and a lack of respect for purpose. And then we see whole countries in disarray and disconnected, not just themselves, but from their from a value system that supports people in our humanness.
Yeah. And I think a lot of those transitions were tied to, understanding our role in life and in relationship to the earth as well too. So I feel that's probably another reason we're seeing that massive disconnect with the planet at the same time too, because a lot of those passages or traditional cultures would have been about connecting with that and understanding our place. I think it comes back to when we all went to the women's circle at the solstice, and just again, even for me, like I said on the last time, it was the first time I was like, oh yeah, I am an emerging elder, and being able to take ownership of that. And so then it's like, okay, now here's the path forward with that, and what do I want that to look like, and how do I want to show up in that role and embracing it.
Yeah, it's the embodiment and the actual presence of knowing where you are in that cycle. and allowing that.
Yeah, and
guess,
what are the go?
yeah, and the learning, stopping to celebrate is part of the learning of what's been before, so we can better ourselves for the future and serve in a better way.
Yeah.
Love it. Yeah, thanks, ladies. I really appreciate you sharing that. It seems to me that, well, one, rites of passages are inevitable for all of us. And two, fundamental human need is significance, and having that opportunity to receive the love and support of the immediate community and those around you is a really pivotal and important step to be able to move through the rite, move through the initiation, or move through the passage to come out on the other side with a broader perspective and a higher awareness on life from the perspective of the individual, but at large, how it impacts on the community and society. And so it seems to me that there's this disconnect, which you all spoke to, around seemingly an illusion that we're all separate, or that we're on our own unique individual journey, kind of. And from my understanding, what Angie spoke to on a kind of deeper spiritual level, and this ties into as well the initiation of birth and the initiation and rite of passage of death, which I'm curious to touch on with you, is how do we open our eyes to a new story of interconnection through a rites of passage and coming into the world, or leaving this world, or opening up our relationship to death and exploring the narrative that we have with death and how that relates to a more expansive perspective of the world and how everything is connected.
A really interesting exercise that I was asked to pursue was to actually, it was your sister, my daughter Kira, asked me to relate and to actually recall the experience I was having whilst I was pregnant with her, and also during the pregnancy, or during the birth, and also the short time when she was a small child, a baby. And it was to look at what emotionally I was feeling, so she could see if there was any patterns that she was carrying in her life that were established within that dramatic entry into the world that we all have experienced. And I think if that's one thing that we can ask, if we can access that information from our mothers and fathers, and actually piece together some kind of understanding of what was going on emotionally for them in the world at the time that you were in their closest keeping, and have some kind of relationship to how that may be affecting your world. And I found that a really deep process myself to explore, and it definitely brought up and showed a lot of things that were relevant, that were, once you can shine the light on those things, you can actually have a mindful awareness around it, and you can let it pass and let it go and clear it to create a fresher and newer and change the approach that you want to, or the thing you want to be in life. So that's one of the ways I suggest.
Yeah, I think knowing your birth story is it's powerful. I think that it's definitely, everybody should explore that. And then for some people, there is processes out there about, recreating or rebirthing yourself as well too, if needed, depending on what's happened in that story. But also, I love that about how that infected like your own journey, because as a woman, I think sometimes when we go into that motherhood journey, we forget really quickly like how much we've changed and how much we've learned, and also remembering maybe some of the things that we do need to let go of that happened during pregnancy, labor, early motherhood days, or later motherhood days for that matter as well too, in stages that we're in. It's incredibly powerful. So it's all about that self-reflective part of the life stages, and how it can be so supportive and healing.
I dropped out a bit. Sorry, my internet's not that good today. So I'm not quite sure if I interpreted your question, because I missed the last bit of it, Shay. But the bigger conversation, I think, aside that, because you were talking about the illusion, and what's a rite of passage in itself, actually, when you begin to understand the world as from duality to non-duality, and the rite of passage from humanity into divinity, and remembering that I think you talked about the that we are actually all one, and when we recognize this, that we are one, cleverly disguised as 7 billion, that's a complete mind shift in itself. It's such a deeper conversation, but it certainly is a for those on a spiritual path, it's a rite of passage of remembering our humanness and seeing how we came into the world. And I think when you talked about birth and death, the thing that birth and death have in common is the first element of a rite of passage, which is separation. So in the birthing process, the baby separates from the mother, and then comes out of their natural environment and into this world of duality, of right and wrong and good and bad, and belief systems that aren't necessarily supporting them. And then if you look at, and then we as humans live our life. And then if you look at the death process, which is just starting to really take on a new narrative, which is really exciting, to look at death in a completely new way. And if some of you, I'm not sure what everybody's individual experience is, but those that have walked loved ones through that last phase of their life, how sacred it is. And it really is about, if I can speak from my direct experience with the death of my father, there came a point where he separated from his humanness. He separated for the last 10 days of his life and came into this absolute place of self-acceptance, and then was able to sort of really just honor the transition, and just as a baby goes with the flow of being birthed through the birth canal, or however the choice is that a woman not so much chooses. Sometimes we don't have choice. I didn't. My 2 children were cesarean, but those final phases of death, and I mean sometimes it comes upon us with a fatal immediate death. But if ever you've watched somebody go through those final days, those final breaths, there's
no.
Apologies for the technical problems we're having there, guys. If my screen is jumping around and pausing, and we left Angie there for a second, but she's back. She's back.
Yeah. Sorry, anyway, I'm not quite sure. I even lost my train of thought because I died off the internet. Yeah, there's that element of a rite of passage as somebody goes into a new dimensional space. There's those elements of separation, the separation from the womb, and then in death, the separation from the human experience.
Yeah. And I think, the separation, and then there's also the surrender that goes in both of those phases too, and just getting back into that flow with life. There are definitely times where we see it's much more apparent compared to some of the other transitions that we have. Definitely. Yeah.
It's interesting, isn't it, to see the interconnectedness of a rite of passage as such, with these sort of significant events.
And I think it's almost like it's a prelude to death, to actually cleanse and clear all of this stuff and actually prepare ourselves for the ultimate, which to me would actually be the next dimension of spirit.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for sharing, ladies. It seems to me that they were moving through on a larger level this collective rite of passage as a human family, in a way that we are coming, as Angie expressed so well, around moving into this perspective and mindset that we are deeply interconnected on a very autonomical level, a scientific quantum physics level, and even more so through a spiritual level, which is all molding and merging into one, which is so beautiful to just be alive in this time. And I can certainly feel it. I know when I'm in that moment of bliss at the creek that I spent all morning today, and I was just sitting there and looking around me and seeing the waterfall and the fresh, clear water trickling through, and then there was the moss and the fish and the big Hercules moth and the Ulysses, and just witnessing all of life in its just most beautiful essence, and that I am actually in a part of it, experiencing one with it, and just soaking up the knowing that as I rest on the rocks, it's like I am a part of the rocks, because I'm here resting in the water, and I am water. And it's just such a huge shift, even that concept to grasp, and not only grasp but embody in my everyday life, with the conditioning and the programming and the operating system of this old mindset of separation. How does one, I'm curious to hear, really not just grasp that concept, but live that knowing in this rite of passage that we're in as a human family, as we move through the initiation process, coming out the other side from a mindset of separation to a mindset of connected oneness. And if we're in the passage, we're going through the death process with these mass suicides, with mass depressions, with mass exodus of insects and animals here on planet Earth. Like, it's almost like we're in that cocoon, for example, of the caterpillar to the butterfly. And the scientific name, which I love about this, is their imaginal cells in the cocoon that is now becoming the butterfly. But what responsibility do we have to recognize that we're here, we're alive and breathing in this process of a rite of passage, this initiation into divinity and heaven on earth experience? What is the number one thing that we can each do on an individual level to contribute towards creating that butterfly experience, or that heaven on earth reality?
Wow, that's huge, isn't it? I think what you're talking about in relation to death, Shay, is the death of the ego, the death of who we thought we were, and we spend a lot of time creating ourselves. They say you spend the first 40 years creating yourself into one thing, and you spend the next 40 years undoing that and uncreating and, letting go of all your belief systems. And I think that's part of that process from humanity into divinity, is the process of self-inquiry, and coming to reflection and I think recognition and acknowledgement of the belief systems that you've taken on that actually don't serve you, that are not even yours, and how they've shaped you or not shaped you. And I think the letting go and the surrendering of who we're actually not, and remembering that we're actually love, and we are part of a human ecological system that's way beyond a human being as such. And I think nature shows us so beautifully. Nature, like, I think your articulation around nature and the rite of passage that nature shows us. Nature shows us how to let go of things, like leaves fall off the trees, and I think if we if we learn from nature, if we do what you were doing, is take yourself into a natural environment, into silence, and into becoming present, not just with your surroundings, but cultivating a sense of internal presence where you can self-dialogue and watch your thoughts coming up and watch what thoughts serve you and watch what are the feelings beyond those thoughts, and really sink in and begin to embody more and more of this, of an inner presence I feel like I've just lost you. Have I lost you?
No, we're here.
Yeah, so going back to, I think, silence and just cultivating an inner presence and listening to your own intuition around who you actually are and what you're here for, and
I think
how to show up
finding purpose
in the world. It's a big.
I think there's lots of practices that you can actually cultivate as well that will enable you to reach those places. And whether it's in community with others, whether it's in a meditation group, or it's in a yoga practice, or it's in an art expression, or anything that allows you to drop in and also connect with self and connect with others as well, is a really good way of exploring that being. And I think Earth is calling out for it more than ever. So you're exactly right. You both said the natural world is a place where we can find that connection and healing, and really that restorative energy that we need to move through this other world that's been created in this disconnect, and actually be and still holding that within us and sharing that as we go about our day. People recognize that, and they feel it, and they think, what are you doing? And when you express the little practices that you may be engaging in, then it ripples out to others as well. And I think more and more people are starting to look for these kind of modalities and understandings and ways of being in this particular energy we've got going in the world at the moment.
Yeah, I think definitely anything that is a reflective practice, or an awareness of a higher self is helpful, because it is really more a case of letting go as opposed to adding things on. So the more time we sit in that silence and that stillness, and we can kind of grow to understand ourselves better, then we can make wiser choices about what we want to carry with us, and how and who we want to show up in the world, and who we want to be in the world. Nature is my favorite place too. So whether that's the beach or the forest, just going in and connecting, so that you realize that there's something bigger than just you. And even looking out at the night stars, like out in the night sky, looking at the moon, any of that kind of being in any of those environments, it's all about connection, interconnection, and connection with nature, connection in community. I think that's where that's going to be the most helpful ways to, does that make sense?
Yeah, beautifully said, Col. I think
Oh, bless her. The internet shut again, poor thing. So she's back now. We'll just get her back in, guys. Just a short break.
Yeah.
To an advertisement. This is real. This is live. We are humans.
Are you going for that?
Go ahead, Angie.
It was really about the practices of embodiment. Helps us get out of our heads and into our hearts and into our wombs and into our hara, as for the masculine, and is to create that vertical core, that connection with source and earth, and the practice of embodiment, where we come into our creative center, which is just under our belly button. And there's beautiful practices that once you sit in that place within yourself, the mind just literally is gone. You know, your thoughts will just disappear once you, when you practice these practices for long enough and with intention. There's nothing that you need to think. There's nothing that you need to do, and you'll be given the guidance from within. And even though that guidance may be reflected to you in the external world, it might come through a person showing up in your life, or a sign that you see on the side of the road, or it symbolically it could come through an animal totem, like wisdom from a particular animal. I'm loving watching the owls turn up at your place, Sal.
Yeah, it's been amazing.
Yeah, and like these are the sorts of symbols and synchronicity that guide us through life, and we cultivate more self-awareness around this when we practice the practices of embodiment, which is being resting and nesting within our own bodies, within the part of our body where we were originally created, which is in our reproductive area. And that's where all the wisdom comes from. I know, Cole, we've done multiple practices in relation to as far as womb practices for women, but certainly cultivating that vertical core so that when we're expressing in the world in that like horizontal, so when we're moving out into the world, that we're solid within our own vertical core and our own connection to our heads and our hearts and our hara, our womb wisdom, and more in alignment with nature. We're more in line with our own cycle and rhythm, and we attune with the cycles and rhythm of nature. And and that's a rite of passage within itself, which is coming out of the intellect and into the, coming out of the head and into the heart. That's the longest journey. That's the longest journey, they say, from the head to the heart.
And there are so many different practices out there, and I think that is the key, is just actually doing them and finding the ones that work for you or that feel best for you too, as opposed to trying to think there's only one way to do this or that kind of thing. I think people get so stuck in that. So just recognizing that there's lots of different paths to doing that. Find whatever works for you and actually practice it. Bring it into your everyday life. That's going to be the key. Yeah,
that's awesome. Thanks, ladies. So guys, if you have any sacred ritual or mindful practice that you love, let us know in the comments what you love to do or how you love to do it, and something that brings you into that present moment awareness. I really want to thank you, Angie, Colleen, and Sally, for sharing the last 43.5 minutes with me and everyone, and discussing all about rites of passages. Before we wrap it up, is there anything that you feel you'd like to share that's relevant for this conversation?
So I have been thinking about, because there is one practice that I felt has been really, really powerful, and I can't even remember where I came across it years and years ago. I'm sure at some retreat or something, and it was just a simple guided meditation, and I'm sure you could find it online as well. And basically through the guided meditation, it takes you to meet yourself in those stages. So, for somebody like us who's in that emerging elder stage, we've been through motherhood, we've been through, maidenhood, whatever you want to call it or how that looks like. But for some of the girls that are maybe a bit younger, you can still do these meditations and tap into the wisdom of your older self. So, your own mother self, your own elder or self as well too, and ask for answers. Because the wisdom's already within you, whether you've reached those physical stages or not. So I think that's quite a powerful one for people to do and to tap into.
I would say remain curious, always asking.
Yeah.
And I think just wrapping up the elements of a rite of passage is understanding that there's separation, and there is telling stories. Stories is part of that, part of a rite of passage, sharing stories. And there's always challenge in a rite of passage. And then there's a witnessing by community, a witnessing by others and by community, as recognition, acknowledgement of this shift in the essence of who you are. And And I think that's one of the things that is the beautiful part on reflection when you've been through a rite of passage, is to look back and just feel, not just see how you've changed and see what your external environment may have changed, but have you changed from an internal perspective? And that's where the gold is. There's so much richness that you can harvest from these rites of passage. And I think it's really important that that as parents or as humans, we create events and rituals and ceremonies that bring this to the attention of the collective. And I think just bringing it more into awareness, particularly in Western society. And I know there's many people that are doing this now, gathering in circle and performing ritual and ceremony. And but I think the more that we can do this, the more we come together as community and as a collective to come into a more heart-centered and heart-directed and heart-orientated life is, I think, it's the answer. You know, it's the way to go. It's the not that there's an answer as such, but that's where that's the remembrance. You know, to remember to come back to our hearts.
Beautiful. Yeah.
Beautifully said, ladies. Yeah, thank you so much again for your time. Thank you guys for watching this video. Again, if you like it, please share it with friends. We look forward to potentially seeing you guys next week on Tuesday, where we sit with the grandmothers, the aunties, the mothers, the lovely ladies, and we just have some yarns about life and community and working together to live in harmony. Beautiful life we live. So blessed.
I'm not sure what the topic's going to be, but if anyone's got any suggestions, it's nice to take on something that we haven't thought about ourselves.
Absolutely. So if you do have a suggestion of a topic, or maybe you want to join us in the conversation, please just let us know in the comments or just reach out to us. We'd love to hear from you, and we hope you have a lovely day. Bye for now. Thanks, ladies.
Thank you. Bye for now.